These people have tried to starve me out. At the end of the day, I earned that money.
A man who spent over $700,000 on his mistress, using his wife's money, is now crying broke. But that's not even the wildest part of this story.
I made him my manager, and then when I decided to divorce him, he had to be fired. In other words, I made him divorced and unemployed all in one day.
She took his job, she took his income, she froze him out completely. And now, the woman he left her for is taking him to court.
The money gone.
What you thought was gonna happen?
The money is gone.
But here's what nobody is connecting. Kevin Hunter isn't just broke. He isn't just dumped. He is now staring down the very real possibility of going behind bars because Shireena Hudson has filed for child support. And Kevin Hunter has absolutely nothing left to pay her with. And when a father can't pay court-ordered child support, judges don't play games. This is not just karma. This is a full collapse. And Wendy Williams, whether she planned it or not, may have set every single domino in motion. Let's get into it. To truly understand how Kevin Hunter ended up potentially facing jail time over unpaid child support, you have to go back to the beginning. Because Kevin didn't just stumble into this situation, he built it brick by brick, with borrowed money, borrowed time, and someone else's empire. For nearly 2 decades, Kevin Hunter operated as one of the most powerful men behind the scenes in daytime television. He was Wendy Williams' manager, her producer, her husband, and for a long time, her entire operation. He controlled her bookings, her contracts, her public image, her finances. Kevin wasn't just her partner in life. He was embedded into every dollar she made, and he used that position aggressively. Because while Wendy was building one of the most iconic talk show brands in television history while she was sitting in that orange chair 5 days a week, giving her entire self to that audience, Kevin Hunter was living a parallel life, a secret life, a very expensive secret life. His affair with Shireena Hudson began as far back as 2007, and from the very beginning, Kevin wasn't just sneaking around emotionally. He was funding the whole operation with Wendy's money. We're talking about a man who spent more than $700,000 purchasing a home for his mistress. A home, by the way, that sat just 9 miles from the house he shared with Wendy. 9 miles. Like he wasn't even scared of getting caught, and the house was just the beginning. Kevin set Shireena up with not one, not two, but multiple businesses. He opened a store for her in South Carolina, failed. He funded an online clothing and jewelry brand called Vish, failed. He helped her get certified as a realtor, that didn't pan out either. He then launched a vegan company for her, and yes, that also collapsed. Every single venture funded almost entirely with money that came from Wendy Williams' work. Now here's the thing that makes this all so much darker. Wendy knew. She knew about Shireena. Insiders who were close to that marriage have confirmed that Wendy was aware of what was happening, and she had essentially accepted a certain kind of arrangement with one non-negotiable condition, one rule. A rule she was crystal clear about. Kevin was not allowed to get Shireena pregnant. That was the line. And Kevin crossed it anyway. When news broke that Shireena Hudson was pregnant with Kevin Hunter's child, Wendy Williams didn't hesitate. She didn't negotiate. She didn't give him a chance to explain. She filed for divorce, and then, in one of the most calculated power moves we have ever seen from a celebrity in the middle of a personal crisis, she fired him.
I made him my manager, and then when I decided to divorce him, he had to be fired. In other words, I made him divorced and unemployed all in one day.
Think about what Wendy did there for a second, because people laughed when she said that line on air. But it wasn't just a clapback, it was a strategic dismantling. In one single decision, Wendy Williams stripped Kevin Hunter of his marriage, his income stream, his professional identity, and his access to her financial world simultaneously. She didn't just leave him, she removed the entire infrastructure he had built his lifestyle on. And Kevin had nothing to fall back on. See, that's the part people keep glossing over. For all the years Kevin spent managing Wendy's career, positioning himself as the architect of her success, he never actually built anything of his own. He hadn't diversified, he hadn't invested wisely, he hadn't created any independent revenue. Every dollar he had access to flowed through Wendy. And the moment she turned off that tap, Kevin Hunter was exposed for exactly what he was, a man who had been living entirely off someone else's work. After the divorce was filed, Kevin managed to secure alimony. We don't know the exact number, but based on the lifestyle he and Shireena were maintaining, the the HOA community, the bills, the day-to-day expenses, it had to be significant. And for a moment, it seemed like Kevin thought he had survived, like he had found a way to keep the money flowing even after the divorce. But Wendy's lawyers had anticipated this. Buried inside the alimony agreement was a clause, a very specific, very deliberate clause that stated Kevin would stop receiving alimony payments the moment Wendy's television contract was not renewed, suspended, canceled, or terminated, and she had no other equivalent television income. Now, did Kevin's lawyers miss this? Did Kevin miss this? Or did they all just assume it would never apply because surely Wendy Williams would be on television forever? We'll never know for certain. But what we do know is that when Wendy's health began to decline severely, when her prolonged absence from the show became impossible to work around, when the Wendy Williams show was ultimately canceled, that clause activated immediately. And just like that, the alimony stopped. Cold turkey. No warning, no transition period, just nothing. What happened next was a slow-motion disaster that played out in public because Kevin couldn't keep it private. With the alimony gone and no independent income to speak of, Kevin Hunter began to unravel, and instead of quietly finding solutions, he started making noise. He went on a public rant, attacking Wendy, her lawyers, and her financial advisor, claiming that they had conspired to cut him off while Wendy was in rehab and couldn't defend herself.
Wendy was in rehab, and these people just stopped depositing my money cold turkey. Now I'm demanding to see all of the bank records from the time of the divorce until now, and that will show what is really going on here. These people have tried to starve me out. At the end of the day, I earned that money, and I'm not letting them take it.
He earned that money, that's what he said. The man who spent years funneling his wife's income into his mistress's failed business ventures, he earned that money. But here's the brutal reality. The rant accomplished nothing because Kevin had no legal ground to stand on. The clause was in the agreement. His own lawyers had presumably signed off on it. The courts weren't interested in his outrage. So Kevin did something even more desperate. He went public with the details of his financial collapse in a way that was genuinely shocking, given how hard he had worked to maintain the image of a powerful man. He revealed that he had fallen behind on most of his bills, that he was behind on his HOA payments, that he could not sustain basic day-to-day living, that things had gotten so dire it was, and I'm using his word here, urgent.
I have fallen behind on most of I currently live in a community that requires payments to the homeowners association, and I'm behind on that bill. My life has been greatly affected since Wendy stopped making payments under our settlement agreement. The fact that I am unable to sustain my life and pay my bills in order is extremely urgent to me. I cannot pay my bills and sustain my day-to-day living.
This is a man who once controlled millions of dollars in a media empire, who bought his side piece a $700,000 home, who funded business after business after business, and now he is publicly admitting he cannot pay his HOA bill. The fall was complete, but the consequences, they were just getting started. Because around the same time Kevin was making these public declarations of financial ruin, Shireena Hudson was watching, and she was done. Sources close to the couple confirmed what many people had already suspected. The relationship between Kevin and Shireena had been deteriorating for months, and the core issue wasn't emotional. It wasn't about trust or compatibility or love. It was money, specifically the lack of it. Insiders said Shireena was not built for broke. She had lived a certain lifestyle for years, funded by Kevin, funded by Wendy's money essentially. And when that dried up, the cracks became impossible to ignore. The pressure at home became unbearable. The comfort she had been promised was gone. And then, just like Wendy had done before her, Shireena Hudson walked out. She moved back in with her mother. She took their daughter, Journey, with her, and she left Kevin Hunter with nothing.
The money gone. What you thought was going to happen? The money is gone.
Now, here is where this story shifts from messy celebrity gossip into something with very real, very serious legal consequences. Shireena Hudson has reportedly initiated the process of seeking court-ordered child support for their daughter Journey. And this isn't just a tabloid rumor. Sources close to the situation confirm that Shireena has been the sole provider for Journey since Wendy's alimony payments stopped. Kevin, by his own public admission, has no money. And Shireena, who has her own history of failed businesses and no major independent income, has reportedly reached her limit, so she's going to court. And this is where people need to pay close attention, because the conversation around this story has been almost entirely focused on the drama, on the karma, on the poetic justice of Kevin Hunter, the man who helped destroy Wendy Williams' marriage and spent her fortune on another woman now being financially pursued by that very woman in a courtroom. But here is the part of this story that is not getting nearly enough attention. Child support enforcement in the United States is not optional, and failure to pay it is not just a civil issue. It is a criminal one. When a court issues a child support order and based on what Shireena is pursuing, a judge will almost certainly issue one here. Kevin Hunter will be legally required to pay a set amount on a schedule every single month. It won't matter how broke he claims to be. It won't matter that his alimony dried up. Courts determine child support based on earning capacity, not just current income. And given Kevin's decades-long career in the entertainment industry, his documented management history, and his professional background, a judge may very well decide that Kevin Hunter should be earning significant money and set payments accordingly. What happens if he doesn't pay? First comes the civil enforcement wage garnishment, seizure of assets, suspension of licenses. But if Kevin continues to fall behind, if the arrears pile up, federal law, specifically the Deadbeat Parents Punishment Act, makes it a federal crime to willfully fail to pay child support across state lines when the amount owed exceeds certain thresholds. And individual states have their own criminal statutes for contempt of court related to child support non-payment. In plain terms, Kevin Hunter could go to jail, not as a remote possibility, not as a dramatic hypothetical, as a genuine, legally grounded outcome if he cannot or will not meet the court-ordered obligation that Shireena Hudson is now pursuing. And the cruelest irony of all of this, the money is gone. Wendy's lawyers made sure of that. The alimony clause shut off the pipeline. The businesses Kevin tried to build both for himself and for Shireena all failed. His lawsuit against Wendy for continued payments was thrown out. His public plea generated sympathy from almost no one. He has no job, no active revenue stream, and a child he is legally responsible for. Wendy Williams didn't just divorce Kevin Hunter. She strategically positioned herself so that when the collapse finally came, and it was always going to come, she would be completely removed from it. That clause in the alimony agreement wasn't an accident. That was architecture. That was a woman and her legal team building a financial exit that would leave Kevin with absolutely nothing to stand on when reality hit. And reality has hit. There's a version of this story where you feel a little sorry for Kevin Hunter, where you think, okay, this man made mistakes, terrible ones, but does he really deserve all of this? And then you remember the details. You remember the $700,000 house, 9 miles from Wendy's front door. You remember the years of gaslighting, of Kevin publicly insisting that Shireena was never about the money, that their love was genuine, that he had built something real with her outside of his marriage. You remember the businesses, every single one of them funded with money. Wendy earned sitting in that chair, pouring herself out for an audience 5 days a week. You remember that Wendy Williams, a woman who was sick, whose health was failing, whose life was genuinely falling apart, had her assets frozen by her own bank while Kevin was out there ranting that he was the real victim. And then you look at what Wendy actually did, because people keep framing this as karma, as cosmic justice, as the universe finally correcting itself. But I'd push back on that framing. This wasn't accidental. Wendy Williams, or at the very least, the legal team she assembled, understood exactly what Kevin Hunter was. They understood how he operated. They understood that the moment the money stopped, the entire house of cards he had built with Shireena would collapse, and they wrote a contract that ensured that moment would arrive. She didn't need to destroy Kevin publicly. She didn't need to go to war with him in the press. She just needed to make sure that when her chapter closed, and it did close, in the most painful and public way, Kevin Hunter would have nothing left to use. And that is exactly what happened. Now, Shireena Hudson, a woman who genuinely believed Kevin was a good bet, who had a child with him, who built her life around access to his access to Wendy's money, is in court, trying to get support for a 2-year-old little girl who had absolutely no say in any of this. And Kevin Hunter, the man who swore he had earned everything he had, is looking at a legal system that does not care about his excuses. So where does this end? Realistically, and I want to be clear that this is based on how these cases typically unfold, here's what Kevin Hunter is facing. A court is going to establish a child support order. That is almost certain given that Shireena has initiated proceedings, and there is a documented child. Kevin will be required to demonstrate his finances to the court, every asset, every income stream, every dollar he has access to. And if the court determines he has the capacity to earn and simply isn't doing so, they will set payments based on that capacity. If he pays, great. Journey gets support. The legal situation stabilizes. Kevin rebuilds from scratch, slowly, with a court-mandated obligation hanging over him every month. He doesn't pay. Or if he can't pay and can't prove to the court's satisfaction why, the consequences escalate fast. We're talking contempt of court. We're talking potential criminal liability. We're talking about a man whose public record already shows he has been unable to sustain basic bill payments, who has no active employment, and who is being pursued simultaneously by banks that have sued him for debt. The jail scenario is real. It is not sensationalism. Family courts across the country send fathers to jail for chronic non-payment of child support every single day, and those fathers are usually not public figures with documented histories of financial mismanagement and a paper trail this long and this clear. And through all of it, Wendy Williams, dealing with her own health battles, her own legal complications, her own painful public story, has one less problem than she did a year ago. Because Kevin Hunter, the man who ran her money, ran her career, and ran a whole second life behind her back, is now someone else's problem, specifically the family court system's problem. The internet has had a lot to say about this, and honestly, the comments tell you everything about how the public sees this. People are saying, I don't want to see anyone broke and homeless, but if anyone deserves a life of headaches and financial struggles, it's Kevin Hunter. And then they turn to Shireena and say, imagine watching how this man treated his ex-wife and thinking he was a good bet to have a baby with, that if he didn't use the money wisely when he had all of it, what made her think he could provide for her and their child? And that's the uncomfortable truth at the center of all of this. Nobody in this story gets to claim innocence. But the person who built the trap quietly, legally, brilliantly was Wendy Williams. And the person who walked right into it with his eyes open was Kevin Hunter. Karma isn't always loud. Sometimes it shows up in a legal clause buried in a divorce settlement.